What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I have been trying to figure out a topic to talk about, for this first video, this first real vlog that I'm making, which should give you a general idea of the direction the channel is going to go in. And as I was going through these various topics, the first one that really crossed my mind was the topic of the friend zone. And the reason why is because there have been so many videos that have been made about this, so many videos where this kind of thing has been talked about. And the more I think about this whole idea of the friend zone, the more that I look back at the videos that I've seen, and I've seen a wide array. I've seen some that basically drive people to internalize why they're in the friend zone. And I've seen some videos that drive people to realize and recognize the reality of the situation. And I want this to serve the purpose of being something that sort of inspires people. But I want to preface this. To create some relatability, I want to preface this. I want to tell a bit of a story. When I was younger, my confidence and really my self-image was low. It was very, very, very low. A lot of the reasons for that are outside the scope of this video, but suffice it to say, it was due to a myriad of different things. My dad wasn't the nicest player or nicest person of all time. He had, for all the great qualities he had a lot of faults. And there were a lot of things that he said and did that helped to really drive that confidence level and self-image down into really probably the lowest point of my life. A lot of this was also impacted by how I was viewed and treated at school. For me, I was a poor kid. We didn't have a whole lot of money, which meant we never had the newest things. We never had any of the newest stuff. We never had the newest clothes. We never had the newest styles and newest shoes or any of that stuff. And the result was that I was really, the girls at school didn't want to have anything to do with me, and the guys never respected me. That ran from middle school up until the early years of high school. Now, by the time I got into my later years of high school, I started to come into my own. But during this time when I was struggling so hard, comic books were the only real escape that I had. And that's why I'm so knowledgeable about comics, is because they were such a huge part of my life for quite some time. During this point, when I was really just struggling, I guess is the best way to put it, I met a girl. Now this, really a girl at the time, laughed at my jokes and thought I was funny, and she gave me attention that I'd never really seen from the opposite sex. Because I was so inexperienced, because I didn't really know the difference between a woman who's laughing at my jokes because she thinks I'm funny as a friend, and a woman who's laughing at my jokes because she's like, man, I really want to get this guy in bed. Because I couldn't differentiate between those two things, ultimately, I misinterpreted where she stood. I made an advance. I asked her out. I said, hey, do you want to go out sometime? No idea why I did that. Had no business doing that. I had no license, no car, no job, no idea what we were going to do. Were we just going to ride around? And when I asked her out, she said, well, I don't date my brother's friends. That was the first response, the first time that she turned me down. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool. We can just be friends. But the more that I was friends with her, the longer that I spent time with her, the more attracted to her, the more attracted I became to her. Why is something that we'll talk about here in a second. But as time began to progress, we started to go our own separate ways. I asked her out several more times, and the answer was always, look, no. It was always the answer that women give when they put you in the friend zone. Well, it's not you, it's me. Well, let's just be friends, yada, 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 gently letting you down. In truth, despite the fact that I had grown into my own during this time, I went and made more friends and did things like play Laser Quest and so on and so forth, live action laser tag at its best. Even though I did all these different things over the course of my life and went to tournaments and so on and so forth, started a full-time job, she was always in the back of my mind. She was always someone that I always thought of. And in truth, in hindsight, all these women that I dated, they were always compared to her. There was the woman I was dating, and then there was her. And for the most part, those women, and they were lovely women, never stood a chance because they weren't her. And that was incredibly unfair for all of them, because I wasn't judging them based on the merits of who they were. I was judging them based on the merits of are they her. The result was that none of those relationships worked out. The time eventually came when myself and this woman came back into contact again. We basically met one another, and I found out that she was pregnant and she was gonna have a son, and she was engaged to be married. And I was devastated because in my mind I had built up this image that I was the person she would settle down with. I was the person she would marry. I was the person she would have kids with. I had built that up in my head. I had created this fantasy inside of my own mind, and I was just crushed by this realization, because what it meant is that she'd moved on. It meant that she continued on the same road she was always on, dating and experimenting and seeing what she was about, until she finally settled on someone that made her happy. Following that, we fell out of contact, and then we came back into contact again, and that leads us to where she and I are right now, which is great friends. She and I are amazing friends. She's one of the longest running friends that I've had, and really, I can't imagine not having her as a friend. I can't imagine not being able to talk to her about the various problems that I face or whatever it is that I happen to think about. Also because she's like I can never remember a psychologist and a psychiatrist. One of them requires medical school and one of them doesn't. And I feel like she's the one that's the psychologist. I think it is. She's like one of those people from Lie to Me, where like she looks at what you're doing, like you're like, oh man, you won't believe what happened. The sky turned green for a second today, and she's just, looking at you, and it's like, you're lying. I can tell by how your eye moved. Plus, you said the sky turned green, which that never happens. I mean, it's kind of funny, kind of a crazy situation. But still, looking back over the course of this whole scenario, the time that I pined after this woman for so long and so many years of my life and compared so many people that I was dating to her, looking back, it's interesting because my initial desire to date her was not predicated on how beautiful she was and still is. It wasn't predicated on anything outside of the fact that she represented a life that I felt like I couldn't get on my own. She represented a better world. All the while, I failed to realize that I was literally a prisoner of my own mind. I could find happiness in any measure of ways, but I wasn't allowing myself to do it because every ounce of happiness that I had was intertwined with, am I with her? If I'm not with her, I'm not happy. If I am with her, then I will be happy. Happiness comes with her. Without her, there can be no happiness. And it's such a skewed and narrow way to look at the world that, again, I just kind of fashioned my own prison, brick by brick, wall by wall, bar by bar. I built this cell around myself. The time eventually came, shortly before things went south with my dad, that he and I had a conversation. He and I were talking about, this woman, but particularly we were talking about what direction things are going to go in terms of the YouTube channel that I had, because the Comics Explained YouTube channel had long since turned into a self-sustaining source of income. I mean, it was literally a business by the time my dad and I had this conversation. And we were talking about her. And he said, son, you have to face facts. If the two of you were ever going to get together, it would have happened by now. And maybe it was just because I was in the right frame of mind, maybe it's because I was in the right circumstance, but it just clicked. And I said, that makes sense, actually. That's true. That's right. I mean, I wouldn't say that the experiences that I'd had up to that point were a waste, but I will say that I passed up so many amazing opportunities. And here's the funny thing, and this kind of leads us into this actual friend zone, portion of this discussion, some 11 minutes into this video. For a lot of you guys who are in this point where you are pining after a woman who does not reciprocate your affections, you're where I was. You are building up this prison around yourself. You're quite literally depriving yourself of happiness under the auspices that happiness can only be found with that person. It's a great big huge world out there. There's 7 some odd billion people. Do you really believe they're the only person that can make you happy? There's no way you could know, because you're not giving anybody else a chance. You're not giving anybody else a shot to make you happy. So get out there, get your heart broken, get crushed, get devastated, because here's the struggle that you're putting yourself in. This man or this woman that you're pining after, they see you as a friend, legitimately see you as a friend. They've told you that. I'd rather just be friends. Where you will watch videos and they'll tell you things like, well, maybe you're in the friend zone because you suck. That will drive you to internalize things. You'll look around and you'll say, well, man, she put me in the friend zone. What's wrong with me? Is it because I don't drive a nice enough car? Is it because I'm not good looking enough? I don't have enough muscles? Is it because I don't have enough money? Is it because my job's not prestigious enough? You'll internalize and say, what's wrong with me? What's the problem with me? But in truth, if you were really as bad of a person as a lot of these videos will tell you that you are, would they even want to be your friend? You have to look at the reality of the situation. They care about you as a person and they want to be your friend. They don't want to be anything more than friends, but they want to be your friend. It doesn't mean that you're undateable. It means they don't want to date you. And this is all relative to the perspective of the person that you're talking to. It's all relative to the perspective of the person that you're interested in dating. One of the things that I've learned at 33 years old, one of the things that I've learned is that as people get older, their perspectives begin to change. For the most part, when it comes to dating in your 20s, it's about experimentation. You walk out there and you're 20, 21, 22, you walk out there and you say, okay, so like 30 is 8, 9, 10 years away. I'm at this point now where I need to start looking at who I want to date and who I would, what kind of person I would potentially want to marry. And that's what you're doing. Over the course of your 20s, you're narrowing down that pool. You're saying, here's the pool of every man everywhere on the face of the earth. And here's all the traits they share, that they all have jobs and they all drive cars and they all, have their own income and they're all maybe nice with kids or maybe not nice with kids, not very good with kids, whatever the case may be. And as you go through your 20s, you start to narrow that pool down. What they're looking for is this sort of spectrum, this spectrum of people that meet each one of these little aspects, these little categories of their life. This is especially important when it comes to single moms, for an example. When it comes to like single moms or single dads, they're looking for a partner that wants to play a role in their child's life, because they will. I can't imagine very many responsible single parents who would sit down and say, okay, like here's somebody that I'm gonna date and I'm dating them because I'm looking to marry them, but I'm never gonna have them involved in my child's life. I can't imagine very many parents that would do that. When my dad met my stepmom, they were dating for months before my dad even introduced us to my stepmom. Now, there were various other reasons for why that was the case, and his perspective was different. It doesn't mean, depending on how you introduce people, it's really relative to the person and what their comfort level is. But still, there are a lot of things that go into why a person chooses a prospective partner. There's a lot of things that are influenced by that. And so you can't necessarily look at this person who's friend zoning you and say, well, it's because there's a problem with me. It's never black and white, and it's never simple. It's not like one or two things that are results of why they don't want to date you. There's a myriad of different things. Maybe they've dated people in the past who have treated them terribly, and you remind them of those people. Maybe that's the reason why they don't want to date you. Again, there's huge things behind that. So my advice is that if you find yourself in a position where you're stuck in the friend zone, what this means is the person they're not interested in dating you. And there's no two ways about it. The only alternative you have is to clock them over the head and drag them into your basement and chain them up. And if that line of logic makes sense to you, you might want to consider turning yourself over to the police because that's a problem. That's an issue. The only alternative you have with a person that's not interested in dating you is to move on. And again, it's not a problem with you per se. It's not a failure in your trait. It just means they're not attracted to you. Don't internalize it. Don't say, well, they don't want to date me because there's a problem with me. No, it means they just don't want to date you. And so what you have to do is move on. Find somebody else, get out there, experiment. Just because of the fact that they don't want to date you, it doesn't mean they're the only person who's ever going to make you happy. They're not the only person who's ever going to laugh at your jokes. They're not the only person that you could potentially settle down with. Find someone else. That's what I did. For me, it's a matter of changing my perspective, of getting out there and playing the field and finally giving other women a chance. Instead of dating some other woman and saying, do you compare to this chick? Instead, look at her for her traits, for what she is, for what she's about. And you have to do the same thing. You have to walk away. You have to move on. You have to find someone out there who will make you happy, because it's the only real alternative you have. It's the only real choice that you have in all this. So anyway, guys, we're gonna go ahead and bring this video to an end. And yeah, hopefully this helped to kind of get you guys on the path of figuring things out in terms of what you're going to do now that you've been stuck in this situation. Again, it doesn't mean you suck. It doesn't mean that you don't have it together. It doesn't mean that you don't have game. It just simply means the other person's not attracted to you. And that's it. That's all it is. So anyway, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end, and I will catch you all later. Peace.